This Choircast podcast is brought to you by A New Way of Seeing, Meaning in Life and the Christian Vision of Nature. I'm Pierce Alexander Marks, the author of A New Way of Seeing. In our times, Christianity has been given a bad name. Fundamentalists and legalists of all denominations have obscured the fundamental moral teachings of the Church. To be a Christian is to be in love with the created world and its creator, to find meaning in every moment of existence. Please take some time to read the book and become reacquainted with the true heart of Christianity. Thanks.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Damn. You join us for our first Smarty Pants episode where I interview an author or a scholar about their area of expertise to answer some question that we've got. Today, Dr. Sam Parks. So here's my question. Why do preachers suck?
I mean, they stand there in a dress and ask you to focus on them for 20 minutes. I mean, people who do that suck.
Dr. Sam Parks, ladies and gentlemen, he has an actual doctorate in homiletics, which is the study of like preaching, but it also, like, if you read it, you might think it's homiletics.
You might think that.
That's a different topic.
It's a different degree. It's a different set of skills.
It is.
It's a different art.
They can be overlapping skills, but not necessarily.
They can be. I've seen it done.
All right. So, but really, like, I can tell you when people that are part of the skeptic pastor community who, DM me, talk to me, get into the Discord, and we start talking about stuff. There is so much religious trauma, right? Mm-hmm. That when I listen to it, I'm like, I don't know what percentage, at least a third of it feels like it's just a really bad preacher, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
like, I don't know. So I think there's probably lots of layers to this, right? And because every denomination is different, right? Every sort of group of Christians is different. And so, like, I think what makes preachers suck who are Southern Baptists might be different than preachers who suck that are Episcopalian, right?
Yep.
So just, if you have to sort of lay out like a couple of things that really, as a person who like actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to sermons and stuff like that, like what is it? Where do you start?
All right. Well, let's start with traumatizing preachers.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
People who say things. So number one, okay, there's a couple of things here. First of all, people discount the terror that can come from mere language.
Right. No, for sure.
They just discount that. No one ever thinks that, a hard word is going to land as hard as it actually does.
Right.
So
I'll have a specific, let me ask you a specific situation from that.
Yep.
So I had a person comment on a video today, and they said that they went to a funeral where the person died from suicide, and in that funeral, the pastor implied that person might not be in heaven, and said that no one, if they were in heaven, if you weren't a believer, you were going to burn for eternity, and then started the sort of altar call, like you should come forward and accept Jesus, while there are grieving people everywhere. Like that,
Right.
that would, for that person who sent that comment and we ended up DMing, that was very, very traumatizing to them.
Mhm.
Why was that traumatizing, do you think?
Well, number one, in that particular setting, they are at a state of emotional exposure and vulnerability.
Uh-huh.
So words like that are going to have a far deeper impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's just this. It is. We live in this coarse, unempathic age. Now, I'm not saying. I think typically, particularly certain kinds of preachers that look like me a lot, who are white and male.
For those people who are listening, but you're white and male, both of those things.
I'm a white dude with gray. I have white hair too, right?
Oh yeah.
And I would like to say that it was prematurely white hair, but it is not. But we have this. I mean, this arrogance. I think somehow to think that that either what we say isn't going to be heard with the same kind of seriousness that many people experience it as, or people say, or we just lack caring. Like we just like what matters to us more is not human lives, but the preservation of certain religious principles. Right.
So they're choosing some religious principle, in this one, like salvation, personal salvation over people's lives and emotional health, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we follow, Jesus more than anything else did healthcare. Like that's what.
Right. No. Right. For sure.
Jesus was like the healthcare dude, right? Like people, that was a serious thing. And particularly mental health.
Oh, for sure.
How many, of course, in
there's
the Bible,
schizophrenic people. There's all kinds of people that he's, for sure. Okay. Right. So, one of the things that comes to mind when I think of that, and I need to apologize to the listeners. I got my undergrad in rhetorical criticism, which is basically speech writing. And so we share some common DNA, and I'm just sorry. I just apologize for that. But one of the things that comes to mind from my undergrad degree in speech writing, which is in no way the same as your doctorate degree, is we learned about something called an exigence, that there was, in different moments, there were sort of expected things, or things that people needed from a moment, like a rhetorical moment, right? And that kind of, it feels to me like that's one of the things that's going wrong, right? Is that there's something needed there, and that was not it.
That was not the thing that was needed. Okay, so this is the other reasons why preachers suck so much, is that they are so focused on their one-way communication for half an hour to however long they preach on a Sunday morning. They're so focused on that one-way communication that they are oblivious to what is actually happening in the lives of their people. Like I can't. So when I'm preparing to preach a sermon, like I want to have in my heart and mind, like who is it that this is for?
Right.
And it can't be for everyone in the room.
No, right. No, not possible.
Right. It's not even possible. So who is it for? And why would it be for them? I have to think about, because here's the thing. Intention and impact are two different things. I can intend to be loving, but does someone experience the impact of what I have said as loving? It requires that, requires that definition of loving impact for there to be love. Like the other person has to experience that as love.
Right.
And
otherwise, you failed. And it's not, no judgment. That happens to me all the time. I intend somebody to experience something one way, and I just did not do it right. Right?
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. That is precisely correct.
All right. So good.
So anyway, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No. Your thing.
Well, I was just going to say that I often, when I am teaching preachers or coaching them, in their work, I talk about the fact that, there's this passage where, right, the word of God is like a two-edged sword, right?
Right.
And I say to them, your words are going to cut.
Right.
Your words are going to cut. There are surgeons who know how to cut in ways that heal.
Uh-huh.
And then there are brutes and knaves and a-holes who just are there to cut, to damage.
Yeah.
And it's the same, but both actions, when we speak, it's just the difference between a surgeon and a thief, right?
Yeah.
That there's somebody who knows well enough, who's thought about this well enough, and even with the best intentions,
right,
can screw it up, as I frequently do and try to avoid.
Right. I think the other thing, there's another sort of aspect to this that some preachers encourage, some preachers just go along for the ride with, and obviously some preachers probably don't, but that sort of really screws everything up. And that is like, I like this surgeon metaphor, right? I go to a surgeon, they've been trained, whatever. I have an incredible amount of trust I am placing in that surgeon when I allow them to put me under and cut open my body, right? And I think that that a lot of people who attend a church walk into the room where the person is going to preach, and it's as if they are showing up at the hospital ready to allow somebody to cut them open. Like they are placing that level of trust in that person. And that's, I think it's important because I've in talking to people, I hear these stories and they just took whatever that person said that was on the stage. They took it all as if it was 1000% true and allowed that into the deepest part of them. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that happens. I think a lot of people if they listen to a politician, they're listening critically. Like, what are they trying to pull over on me?
Right.
But a lot of people walk into church and they don't do that. And I don't mean to put it on them, right? I don't mean to put it on the hearer, right?
No, we've trained them to be that way, right?
Yeah,
like so there's something about, right, American Christian religiosity, and particularly Protestant religiosity.
Okay, right. Yeah, for sure.
Although, any tradition can be traumatized, but there's something about our tradition that is very clergy-centric. That
clergy means pastor, by the way, for people who are not like in on the lingo.
Yep, that's it. Or preacher-centric, where we're from, particularly in the American Southeast. People defer to us a lot, right? And so we get.
I remember walking into a church where I was serving. I was not preaching. I was just it was a long time ago, but I was just the youth pastor, which can carries no weight or validity or import in most churches. And I walked in, and the pastor has a sermon where the pastor is giving financial advice as if he were a certified financial accountant.
Yeah.
And people are there taking notes. I assume they're going home and like rearranging their stock portfolio.
Yeah.
But part of that is that he felt like he could say that.
Yeah. He probably found that in a blog post like 30 minutes before the service started. You know, that's probably what it was. There were 5 points in a blog
No, they
post.
just listened to Dave Ramsey on the way there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know there's a lot of difference. There's a lot of difference to who we are. And we created this thing over the course of centuries that I refer to as the devil's bargain.
Uh-huh.
And it goes something like this, that we pastors are so, we're, many of us have been to seminary. We've taken courses from, excellent professional and biblical interpreters and theologians. And our services have been retained by the congregation. And what they really want is for us to make it rain.
Right.
And so we go back into pastor study and we try to figure out what the formula is. What's the rain dance this week that's going to work? Right. And we think we found it. We go out and we dance the dance, and hey, maybe it rains. And so people are inspired. They feel inspired. They've heard something meaningful, and they get to kind of check the box because they've been to church on Sunday. They've heard an inspiring word, and now it's time to just go drink coffee and just forget about all that.
Right.
And everybody gets to feel good about themselves, right? Like they'll stand at the back, pastor will stand at the back door, greeting people. Oh, it's a great, nice sermon, pastor. Oh, that was really inspiring. Blah, blah, blah. Pastor feels good. Parishioners feel good. We all feel good. But there's nothing really, there's no purchase beyond that moment. When the truth is, we imbue what we do with this magical aura that we're holding these ancient texts up against our lives and looking for where the sparks happen, and that somehow we are the ones who have that capacity. Dude, anyone can do that shit.
Right.
Anybody.
For sure.
Anybody can take these texts and thoughtfully and meaningfully hold them up close to their lives and find meaning that isn't traumatizing or destructive. Like anyone can do that.
Right.
What I'm doing on a Sunday morning is just modeling one way that you could do that with this text. Right. So I always wish my parishioners could hear more voices, more interpreters than just me.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to operate a cult of personality. I want people to grow and thrive in their faith community, no matter what it is. Right. Whether they're Mormon or Jewish or Muslim or whatever. Flying spaghetti monster. I'm fine with that as long as you are growing and thriving as a human being. I want you to be able to do that. And I don't think it's easy to do that with a steady diet of rhetoric from one person. You just, no. I mean, you can't go to college and get that. There's no one person who's telling you every aspect, who's instructing you in every aspect of your education. There's no one method. There's no one, we expose ourselves in the educational system to this broad variety of approaches, at least in public education.
Right.
Why do we feel like church has to be this univocal thing because it does terrible things to pastors and congregations. It endows us with too much power.
Yes.
And, our people want to hear, and they need to hear other voices, and particularly voices that do not necessarily agree with ours and that come from sets of life experience that are radically different from ours.
Right.
I don't ask me how I'm doing that in my new appointment yet. So,
yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to think of like,
yeah.
So you've got your aunt who, like, I'm just gonna say, most of the people who are listening to this podcast, they're not going to churches, they're not downloading preaching podcasts, they're not doing that,
Yep.
right? But their aunt is. Their aunt sits at home all day listening to preaching podcasts and listening to preachers, and then calling her niece and saying, "Oh, you got to get your life right. You got to. Why aren't you coming to like what?" Her aunt sort of is regurgitating all of this bad preaching. What do you do as that niece? Like, how do you have that conversation about your aunt or with your aunt and without just blocking her, not answering the phone call, like separating yourself from her, which may need to happen. Like, to be clear, like if your aunt's being super hateful, harming you, that kind of stuff, that you just got to let it go. But there's got to be something in between just smiling and nodding and completely cutting off your crazy relative who has a preacher that is just spewing hateful garbage into their brain over and over again.
But, Aunt Edna's so sweet, Jeremy. I mean, every other thing in her life, she's just a lovely lady.
Oh, Aunt Edna.
Aunt Edna,
Sorry, I couldn't understand Southern dialect for a minute. Aunt Edna is Aunt Edna.
Aunt Edna. Well, I could have gotten Appalachian and said Aunt Edna, but I mean, part of that is going to depend on Edna and who she is and how open or not she is. I mean, I think for me, when I encounter people like that, particularly in my own family,
right? Yeah.
I think my typical response to them is, I just happen to think differently about that, and then shut up.
Mm-hmm. Just shut up.
Now, if they want to keep pressing the topic, I'm willing because of my background and experience. I'm willing to go there with Edna if she wants to go there. They usually don't. They don't. Right. Most people do like that. Do not want to hear a contrary story, right?
Yeah.
Of how that particular doctrine or that idea or that ethic or whatever should unfold. And I almost always appeal to experience, and those people hate that. Right? Because human experience to them is like the stupidest source for reflecting on faith.
Of authority, right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's no authority in human experience. The only authority is the Bible, right?
Right.
Well, and is that preacher's interpretation of the Bible? Let's be clear.
That's correct. Right. And we don't do that in almost any other area of our lives. We trust experience so much, maybe even too much some days, and then we have this one area where like experience isn't allowed,
Right.
And I've been involved with PFLAG, which is...
What is PFLAG?
So PFLAG is a national organization. It was founded in the early 70s. It's not faith-based at all, but you'll find chapters if you go to PFLAG, pflag.org. You'll anywhere in the United States and perhaps globally too. I don't really know, there are local chapters who are there to help support, educate, and advocate for LGBTQIA plus people and those who love them. And it started off as an advocacy group for the acronym was, parents, family, and friends of lesbians and gays. But now that acronym no longer really covers the mission of PFLAG, which is much larger. Okay. PFLAG commercial over with. Everyone go to PFLAG if agreed. Yeah, if you're a lesbian,
it's an amazing organization.
It's absolutely fantastic. But I have worked with PFLAG for many years, and these beautiful kids, right? Literally teens usually, who are there who have just been beaten up at church.
Yeah.
And they walk in, and when they are able to finally come out and all of their negative health metrics begin to abate, they begin to disappear, and their lives improve, right? Their tendency to get involved with drugs and alcohol goes down. Like, it's just all the things, all these metrics that improve, their experience of life improves.
Yep.
And of course, all that they've ever been told, right, is that their experience doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I don't know why preachers discount the experience of living in a body so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. If two people love each other, and are able to, they find a way to create a covenant community together. We won't even call it marriage. We'll just call it, they covenant their lives together in some meaningful way. And they thrive as a result of it. It is really, really hard for me to see Jesus looking at that and saying, "Oh, well, that's not what I was talking about." About abundant life. What the hell does abundant life mean?
Right. If it's not all of the things you just described.
That's it. And it is really unfathomable to me. But I grew up in a place like that. I grew up in rural Tennessee, and frankly, I'm not entirely sure how I came out the way that I did. But this is a freaking mystery. But I just love people, and I trust their experience. Right. What they tell me is happening. Right.
No, and in the world of faith, I feel like at least in Protestantism, well, and all of the things, I would say not Catholicism and Orthodox streams of Christianity. I would say that there is this almost like a fetishization of the Bible and the preacher, to where if I experience God more in nature than in your stupid sermon, somehow there's something wrong with me. Right?
Yeah.
Which is funny because I spent a lot of time in the Deep South. And in the Deep South, there are many Southern men who hunting is a thing for them. And you talk to them, and if you can get talking about spirituality and really feeling God's presence, it's never in church. But if you tell them that a lot of people that experience God more often in nature than in church, they'll say, well, hell, in my deer stand, I definitely, whatever. They will say that, but somehow preachers, I think, imply that their sermon is the best way for you to experience God. And it's just not.
It is so
It's
true.
just not. Okay, so Sam, here's the thing. We're talking to, I think you called her Aunt Edna. Okay.
Yeah.
And Aunt Edna has been told some things. And I just want, as a person who is an actual scholar in preaching, I would like for you to help me as a person who could care less about Aunt Edna's preacher, but does want to have a conversation with her. How do you respond to this? Like, and tell me what happened to her. Why does she think this? And like, how do I respond? So Aunt Edna is going to say something like, well, I just believe the Bible. Right. First, what the hell does that mean?
So you want me to answer as if
I want you to tell me. Well, like, what does Aunt Edna mean by that? Because
what she
that
believes
doesn't make a lot of sense
that,
to a lot of people.
Well, because she picked up the King James Authorized Edition.
Good God.
From 16 and 11, which God knows I'm always in the 17th century, digging around for recipes and science experiments and shit,
Health.
So anyway,
health advice. Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, health advice. Absolutely. So, she is exercising the Protestant principle. She can read the Bible and interpret it for herself. And she, so what Aunt Edna probably wants is to be right. She wants the comfort of being correct.
Yes.
She wants the comfort of being correct.
And like something that she can believe forever. Right?
Yeah, that's right. That
never
is,
question.
That is eternally right. That is eternally
like a security blanket.
Yeah. That is okay. One might say that is true. That for her, right? There's this, there's this concept, whatever it is. I believe the Bible. But she has not thought critically in any way about the particular truth that she's espousing and has read in the Bible. Here's the thing that is really frustrating to me. Almost everyone now has had a high school education. Almost everyone. Now I understand that there are people who do not, for various reasons, don't choose to do that. I'm not trying to argue that. I'm just saying, factually, that's true. There are many people that have college educations, particularly a lot of people in churches. You applied your mind to subjects. You were corrected and you were shown in that discipline how to avoid mistakes and how to admit mistakes when you've made them. Why is this discipline any different? I don't get it. But Aunt Edna sees a grand chasm, right, between her pastor and the need. Like there's no desire for depth. I'm trying to think of kind of some of the language I'm talking about. She doesn't want to go deep, but she wants like kind of like a bowling ball, right? Like a bowling ball. It has trajectory. It has heft. It's going to do damage. It's going to accomplish something at the other end. Right. But then as soon as that's over with, the frame will reset and we're done and we're, you just have to keep throwing the ball over and over again. But the ball feels heavy enough. It just feels true. Right. And it accomplishes something down there and I feel okay with it and my score is good and okay, fine.
Yeah.
Instead of, an experience where like, this is how I fell in love with the Bible. Now, I know that there are probably a lot of people listening to this podcast right now that the only good use for it is kindling, right? Get it? Totally understand that. I fell in love with this crazy fucking set of writings because they're wild, right? They are wild and fun. And yes, they're damaging, they say awful things, make terrible claims about who God is and all this stuff. But I've learned how to read this shit critically enough. And you know what? For me to say, I just am not going to follow any image of God. I'm just not doing that. That's another Protestant principle. I can make my own mind up. And I just am, I have a child who identifies as, part of the LGBTQ community. I myself identify as part of this community. And I'm not on with any image of God or any text that undoes these beautiful people, right? I just am not. But Aunt Edna she is just not there. She is not there.
So when she says
she's done enough study and enough, she's listened to enough to feel enough solidity to be able to turn around and share that on someone, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about she's going to call you, and she saw your post about going to a gay wedding on Facebook, and and she's going to say something like, there's going to be a time when like this, you don't have forever to make this choice. One day, all the Christians are going to disappear. And they're going to go to heaven, and you're going to be left here. And I don't want you to be left behind, right? She's like, I'm afraid for you, and like I don't want you to be left behind. So that is a crazy idea called the rapture that was invented by this guy John Darby in the 1840s, which is just made up.
Right.
First off, but why? I think one of the things that I hear people say is they say, like, I think they really, like, when I hang up the phone after getting in a screaming match with Aunt Anna or whatever her name was, and I calmed down, I think she was honestly coming from a good place in her head, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I want my nephew to not be here during the tribulation. Right.
Right. And or if she's trying to save you, like, I want them to be in heaven. Right.
As if that's somewhere other than here.
Right. Now, but we're not going down that road.
Okay, we're not going there.
We're not going
there. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we can, just not today. But but what did she hear? First off, what did she hear from her preacher that made her think that?
Well, she heard sermons taking several texts out of their own context, or that could and should be interpreted differently, and wove them together into some pastiche that looks like what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's the same problem when she calls you and tells you that God is really angry at you because you got a tattoo, right? It's the same problem.
Yeah.
Somebody took something out of context.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, most of the time, that's the issue. But even there are people who go to school and study for years to understand John Darby's, modes of premillennial dispensationalism or whatever the hell it's called, and I mean, there are people that study and become experts on that stuff so that they can teach it, that And look, that's one way of looking at the text.
Right.
But the problem is that they feel the need not to just own that for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They feel the need to foist it, right, upon those closest to them, right?
And it's partially because of the preacher, right?
Absolutely. I mean, where did she get this idea to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's us. It's us.
Right.
Pastors shape American Protestant Christianity, period. It is very pastorally formed. And I don't care what tradition you're talking about, really, you know, it is. And so if your preacher has sucky ideas that do not treat the text with the kind of love and sincerity and interest that you would treat anything else, right? It's unfathomable to me. It's so hard to understand.
Is there any way to help Edna see her preacher for who they are? See the see more gray instead of black and white?
All right. So, and Edna says, okay, there's going to be grand rapture or whatever, and I want you to be a part of it. You know, and she knows that you're not a person of committed faith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think if it's safe, don't expose yourself to idiots. Okay.
Right. No, for sure.
Don't like, there are people walking around that claim to be surgeons that are, you know, they're working with a rusty carbon steel blade, right?
Right.
But if you feel like you can have a conversation with Aunt Edna, I think just simply asking her to talk more about those things. Where are you reading this in the Bible? Let's look at it together. What does the Bible actually say? Is your interpretation dependent on a translation or in a stream of translations? Okay. Because there are streams of translation activity. I think that's the wild thing, right? Like,
for sure.
We don't have the original manuscripts for any of this shit.
No, not even close.
All be typos. It just could be all be.
It's possible. Yeah, and I think that's good. And I think I like that because and I think the other piece that you can do with Aunt Edna is not try to have one conversation to convince her, but have 1,000.
Yes.
Send her a clip from Dan McClellan. Yeah. Send her this podcast. Send her whatever. Say, hey, and I heard this. I saw this thing about the Bible, and it made me think of you. And I thought you might be interested.
I have an idea. So there is a group. I'm probably going to get slammed for this because I don't know all of their thoughts about everything, but that's part of the problem too. But there are some interpreters that are ex-evangelical enough but they're still adjacent to some of those evangelical communities. They kind of have that lingo, that language. So I have frequently used in local churches materials from the Bible Project, and I know we're not here to advertise for anybody else, but BibleProject.com, mainly two great people, but there's a whole large team of people now. But, you know, they come from an evangelical perspective, but they've gotten woke a little. And, or a lot. And, but Aunt Edna might appreciate hearing them and their perspectives, because they often will talk about, hey, I used to believe this. This is where I used to stand. Pete Enns does a lot of that with the Bible for Normal People, you know. And But that is maybe too academic for Aunt Edna. But
Right.
now the Bible Project might just hit her, right? So resource that woman, right? Resource
You know,
Aunt
I
Edna
think
with something
and
else.
resource yourself, because it also can help you sort of understand her mind and her thought process. A book that I often recommend to people that are who are evangelical or are ex-evangelical, people who were wounded, and they're trying to actually understand this, what the Bible says or doesn't say about the LGBTQ community. I often recommend this book called Holy Love by a guy named Steve Harper. Steve Harper used to be an evangelical professor at an evangelical seminary, and figured out he got lost along the way. And he has written a book that it's real thin. It's for normal people. And I think it's the best book for me to say, and this is real skinny.
Yeah.
Read this. I just want you to read this. This guy used to believe exactly like you believe. And he can talk he says the right words, right?
Why don't we sit together, Aunt Edna, and let's just read it out loud together. We'll take a paragraph at a time. We'll stop and we'll talk about it as often as you like. You know?
Well, that's a lot of time with Aunt Edna, but I'm here for it.
It is. But that's good stuff. It's good stuff when you can sit together with a text, because you're not the one who's doing the teaching or correcting or whatever, right? You can both kind of sit together and identify with each other and then look at this third thing. And that can be helpful. You may not agree with everything that Steve Harper says in Holy Love.
Oh, for sure.
But no, I think that's a fantastic thing. Resource yourself and these other people if they're open to it.
Right.
A lot of people.
Well, and that's hopefully you're leaning into a relationship with someone who loves you and who you love, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, last question.
Okay.
There are people, for whatever reason, who used to go to church, don't anymore. Every once in a while, they wake up and they say, you know what, maybe I should try it again. And they probably look online, right? Check it out. Sometimes they even go once or twice, and then somehow they doesn't work out. So so here's what I want. What is 1, 2, 3? I don't know how many you've got. Things that, like, if I go to a church for the first time, I'm listening to this pastor for the first time. What are some warning signs that I can pick up on that this is a person that is really not being responsible in their preaching, and ultimately they're going to say something crazy, and I don't want to be 6 months in when they show up and say something crazy or way off the wall. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are there warning signs? Are there like, you're a preaching professor. You show up in a church. I feel like Sam Parks shows up in a church, listens to a preacher. In 10 minutes, you've got a sense, right, of whether or not this person is somebody you want your family going to their church. What do you hear? What do you look for?
So here's the problem with that question, and that is, with me answering it, is that I'm a judgy bitch. And so
this is why I'm asking you. This is exactly why I'm asking you.
Oh, golly dog. Okay. Even before the pastor says a word, what is it like for women on the dais? Can women speak in this forum? Are they invited to be a part of worship leadership? Are people who are differently abled recognized and cared for in this room in a meaningful way? So before the pastor ever says anything, look at the community that their preaching shaped, or the preaching of the people that preceded them have shaped, right? Because what you've walked into is not a church. What you've walked into is a culture.
Yes.
And right. So we can begin to discern things about this culture pretty quickly. Like, I mean, do they, when you walk in the door, do they still have, do they have stained glass where they have like Confederate soldiers, in the stained glass and dealt with?
Right.
I mean, there's a whole lot of little signs. But now, if it's been pretty benign, or let's say Edna just sends you the sermon. Let's say just the sermon, that's all you have, right? This is where we get down to, I want to know, I want that sermon to reveal to me, like, if illustrations are used, who are the people in these illustrations? What level of experience do they have, or is their level of experience? Does their experience touch mine at all? Right? And this is hard to do in a single sermon, right? Because pastors are creative and crafty. They can fool you.
So one thing that's a red flag for me is this is the kind of stuff that makes people tell me I'm going to hell on TikTok. So just everybody, we're all going to go to hell together. Yeah. All right. So, but if a pastor gets up and asks people to take out their Bible, I am starting to be a little skeptical, because they're assuming everybody there has a physical Bible. And if they don't call it a Bible, if they call it a sword, if they call it, anything other, we've got all kinds of red flags, right? And then
God's word.
Get out God's word. No. Right?
No, this is not even C.S. Lewis. Even C.S. Lewis was like, no. These documents are not God's word. If anything, they just simply make God's word possible, right? If anything. So anyway, all right, So right.
That's a red flag for me, right? That's a huge red flag.
Then
if they're using the King James version, that is also a huge red flag.
Yep.
Because the King James version is the least accurate translation that is easily available on the market right now.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, it was inaccurate when it was written. So, even according to the documents that they had at the time. But I'm kind of that way also, like, I want to know if they're reading the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. Okay.
Right.
If they're reading the Common English, even if they're using the New International Version, and that is a translation from a more conservative point of view, but it is still quite good.
Yes.
But New American Standard always worries me a little bit, although I like it sometimes. That kind of thing.
ESV worries me.
Yeah.
But King James is the actual blinking red light that says turn around.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, if you want all of your, biblical and interpretive capacities to be stuck in the 17th century, go ahead. I don't think anything else in your life is really stuck there. So, the other thing
go ahead.
Going to get to is in the latter half of the sermon, watching out for the emotional manipulation. Pastors who beg to be agreed with all the time, red flag. When they say they're preaching right along, they say, "Am I right? Can I get an amen? Can I?"
Yes. This is a huge one.
They're just begging for validation. And what that does is it gets everyone in the room, you start getting groupthink, right? And people who want to dissent are like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't because everybody else around me seems to be, I must be wrong somehow, right? Because that's a big one. I think that, illustrations, pastors get illustrations from all kind of damn places, but, illustrations that are just emotionally manipulative in the worst kinds of ways that describe, human death, deathbed type stuff, things like that. Like these are, in other words, what that pastor is doing is drawing on experiences of grief and or guilt and or shame that other people have. If that pastor's primary way to get you to assent to their truth is by touching your shame, there is a problem. There is a problem. And that would be something that I would certainly look out for. It's funny that we're talking about this too, because my daughter is just went to college. And so there's a very conveniently located church near where she's going to school.
Right.
And I have encouraged her, Harper, this is a good, this is a default, but I don't want you to go to church there every Sunday. I don't want you to go to church there every Sunday. I want you to be able to go listen to different people, get different ideas, have different experiences, because I don't want you to get stuck yet, not now, and she has taken that to heart. And she has been a couple of times at the conveniently located church where I have every confidence that she's hearing some pretty good things. But that congregation also just made a whole set of rules about who could get married in their church, and it does not include her. So I do not want her to get stuck there. As benign as I think the preaching she's going to hear there is, it's always good to, if you come away from a single instance and that pastor was using a passage, I would go away from there and I would try to find what are some other ways to think about this? Is this guy or gal, women can be,
right.
Even though they're, they can be just as terrible. But what is get a second opinion. You would do that if you went to a surgeon, right? If you went to a surgeon and they kind of described what they were going to do, and you thought, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if I would interpret the data that way. I don't know if I'd interpret the test, that way. I'd like to get another opinion. What's the harm in that? That can save your bacon, baby. And a lot of time,
Oh man, a lot of time.
A lot of time. And can I tell you how many, and this is why so many of my friends in the queer community just don't darken the doors of churches, not because they've heard so much hateful rhetoric, but because they've been baited and switched. And they have been told we're a welcoming church. We love everyone here. Everyone is welcome here. This particularly happens if you show up as a couple, right? Like if a single individual shows up, you're just theoretically gay, right? But it's when you show up with a significant other that shit becomes real. I hope I'm not cursing too much for this podcast, by the way, too. So.
You're great. You're great. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I figured that was the case, so I was just rolling. But now I can't even remember what we were talking about. What was I talking about?
You said if you show up as a couple, everybody knows that. Knows you if you show.
So, you're like, oh, they do things with that person, right? Like that, things then become a lot more clear. I have a good friend of mine who was clergy person in what we call in our tradition a reconciling congregation, which is a congregation that celebrates queer folk, right? But that person wound up having to leave because she got married to her fiance, who happened to be another woman, and the congregation still couldn't handle it. So, anyway, those are good strategies, I think. Listen for Bible translations, and listen for how rhetoric is being used. Who are the people that are being referenced? What is their kinds of experience? Are you being emotionally manipulated by stories of death or, guilt and sinfulness? Here's another one that always gets me, and that is, does everything fit together just a little too well? Because there's one question I ask myself when I'm writing the notes for a sermon. I usually get to a point where I'm like, I need to account for how all this might be bullshit.
Yes, right.
All this might be bullshit. And definitely. I need to be able to explain why, at least today, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. It's some tentativity. Like, we're talking about faith. We're talking about shit we can't measure. You can't, I don't know what the distance is from here to heaven, right? I have no idea.
Right. If somebody feels so confident in this one very specific, if there's no hint that they might be wrong.
Yeah. There's a difference, Jeremy, between certainty and assurance. Like, certainty is a concept that is foreign to, much religious life, right? There are few things we can be certain of when we are talking about the numinous, right? You just can't be. So people who speak with that level of certainty and confidence scare the crap out of me. Because I'm like, like, did Doctor Who take you in the TARDIS, escort you to some, realm where all this stuff is actual? No, we have to preserve some tentativity. We have to, be able to say to ourselves, I could be entirely wrong about this. And say that. And give permission, like sermons that give no room for people to disagree.
Well, Sam, my bet is that most of the time you really don't suck as a preacher, and I really appreciate you taking your time to be on the podcast and help us figure out how to deal with all of this, because it's not simple, but you have helped so much. I really appreciate it. And if people want to find out more about Sam Parks, is there socials? Is there websites? How do they do that?
Well, so the best place to
if they want you to come and judge their preacher for them, like how do they make that happen?
You can contact me. So almost all of my handles are Preacher 1120, PREACHER 1120. That's on X. That's on Facebook. I'm pretty sure that's on Insta. I'm not entirely sure if that's my handle on TikTok, but you can just look for Sam Parks, and I should be there.
Thank you so much, Sam.
we have this wonderful community of people that we call Not Church. It's a bunch of people that are all over the spectrum, from Buddhist to people who used to be Christian, who are all wanting to explore spirituality. One of our people called it Not Church, right? It's everything that they wanted from church. There's spiritual discussion. We are there for each other when difficult things are going on in our lives, but no one is yelling at you and telling you that you're going to hell for not believing the right thing. So if you're interested in that, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. That's patreon.com/skepticpastor. $3 a month will get you access to that Discord and this wonderful Not Church community. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place, okay? We'll see you next time.